The story begins a teenager named Rez, who finds herself in a small room filled with telephones mounted on the walls. Suddenly, one of them rings, the one with a sticky note on it. Residential answers the call and hears an automated voice congratulating her on getting a royal flush. Confused and trying to understand what's happening, another phone rings, and then another, all repeating the same message. Then, unexpectedly, water starts pouring out from the telephones, and the room begins to flood. Residential looks up and notices a bathroom connected to the ceiling. Realizing she needs to flush the toilet, she starts climbing the wall using the phones for support. But when she reaches the top, she finds the toilet handle missing. Panicking, knowing she'll drown if she doesn't act fast, she forces herself to stay calm and reads the number on the sticky note. An idea strikes. With barely any time, Residential drops back down and uses one of the phones to dial the number. It works. A secret compartment opens, revealing the missing toilet handle. She climbs back up, fixes the handle, and flushes the toilet, releasing all the water from the room and saving herself. Just seconds later, it's revealed that the entire experience was just a simulation, part of a universal reality game. Later, she returns home and has dinner with her father. It's clear they're very close, especially since Residential lost her mom at a young age. Suddenly, the lights in the room begin to flicker and the power shorts out. Then we're shown different parts of the city as the electrical output across the grid starts failing. Everything that runs on electricity begins shutting down. Back inside the house, Chris doesn't think much of it, and even Rez assumes it's just a normal power outage. Due to the ongoing short circuit, her entire computer setup catches fire. She manages to put out the flames, but fails to save her equipment. Later, in the living room, Chris lights a lantern and tells his daughter that maybe this blackout is a much-needed break. The two of them start looking through old photos on an iPad, reminiscing about the time when Rez's mom was still alive. Eventually, they fall asleep together on the couch. In the middle of the night, Residential hears a strange noise coming from the storage shed. Without waking her dad, she quietly grabs the lantern and heads outside. Inside the shed, she finds a book titled Radioflash, another term for an electromagnetic pulse or EMP. As Residential looks around, we realize the shed once belonged to her grandfather, Frank, who moved to the mountains years ago. A moment later, she notices an old radio station setup and, hoping to get answers, starts working to get it operational. She manages to power it up and sends out a call to her grandfather. A few seconds later, Frank responds. It turns out he knows a lot about this blackout. He calls it the beginning of the apocalypse. According to him, the entire western region has been affected by something unknown, and he suspects it may be an electromagnetic pulse attack. Frank insists Residential and Chris must leave immediately and come to the mountains, where he's already prepared with enough supplies to survive. Before ending the call, Frank tells Residential about a map and a mobile radio that will help guide them on their journey, though the radio will only work once they're within range of Frank's transmission. This makes it clear that Frank had already been preparing for an event like this. The next morning, Residential explains to her father just how serious the situation is. At first, Chris refuses to go to Frank's place, calling him a crazy old man. But when he sees how determined his daughter is, he agrees, at least to call Frank. Soon after, they head out to the shed, and Residential starts the radio transmission again. Once she leaves the room, Chris and Frank begin to talk. Frank explains what's really going on behind the blackout and reveals that it's the result of an EMP, a pulse that will soon spread to the entire country, causing widespread panic and chaos. He warns that in just 3 days, all supplies and devices will be gone. That's why going to the mountains is their only real option. Hearing this, Chris finally agrees to leave the house. A short while later, he and Residential begin packing their things as the situation outside grows worse. With a prolonged power outage, law enforcement and citizens have begun to clash. Amidst the unrest, Chris and Residential get into their car and begin their journey. Along the way, they stop at a supermarket to pick up some supplies. However, when they witness people violently fighting over basic supplies like food and water, they quickly decide to leave the store. As they drive away, It's revealed that thousands of others are also attempting to flee the city. In the next scene, the father and daughter stop at a bridge where an accident has blocked the road. After waiting for hours, and as tensions peak, one man loses his patience, rams another car out of the way, and speeds ahead, clearing the path. Seeing this, Chris and Residential quickly jump back into their car and continue their journey. Later that night, while driving, Rez notices that they've taken a wrong turn. When she points it out, Chris gets distracted, and for a split second, he takes his eyes off the road. In that moment, their car veers off and crashes into a forest. The next morning, Chris wakes up Rez, checking if she's okay. Fortunately, she's unharmed, but Chris has a visible head injury and is bleeding. With no vehicle, they decide to follow a nearby river that should eventually lead them to Frank's cabin. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Frank starts growing worried as they haven't arrived by morning like they were supposed to. Chris is struggling to walk, so Residential tells her father to take a short break. They stop near a waterfall and fill their bottles with water. While there, Residential notices a serious wound on her father's back and a deep cut on his arm. Despite Chris insisting that he'll be fine, she begins treating the wound right away. A little while later, they continue their journey, but Chris has become extremely weak. Eventually, he collapses and, just before losing consciousness, tells Residential to go find help. Without wasting any time, she runs through the forest, where she comes across a farm and meets a farmer named Glenn. Seeing the girl, Glenn quickly helps and brings Chris into his home. Sadly, despite all efforts, Chris doesn't wake up. He stops breathing. Residential is devastated, having now lost her father as well. That night, Glenn helps her bury Chris in the field, and they mourn in silence. The next morning, Glenn decides to help Rez reach her grandfather's cabin. They pack up in a blanket-covered trailer and begin their journey. Meanwhile, Frank grows tired of waiting and decides to search for Chris and Residential himself. After a few hours, he reaches the crash site and finds a blood-stained piece of cloth beside the car. Frank follows the road and eventually locates the farmhouse where Residential had been. Inside, he finds blood on the couch but no sign of anyone. He then takes a closer look at a photo of Glenn and sets out again. Outside, he notices someone has been buried and realizes that Chris is gone. But there's no time to grieve. His granddaughter is still missing. Elsewhere, Glenn and Residential spot a man on the side of the road asking for help. Glenn quickly tells Residential to hide in the back of the trailer, just in case the man turns out to be dangerous. Their fear comes true when the man suddenly pulls a gun on Glenn and shoots him. The man then gets into the trailer and drives away, with Residential still inside. After a while, he stops near a repair shop and sneaks in to steal gasoline from a nearby truck. But suddenly, a hunter appears and shoots the man dead. Residential takes this chance to escape, but not long after, she's caught by the same hunter. He places a bag over her head. When she opens her eyes, she finds herself face to face with a strange old woman who claims Residential trespassed on her property. Meanwhile, Frank discovers Glenn's dead body, which makes him even more worried about Rez's safety. On the other hand, during dinner, the old woman introduces Residential to her bizarre family. Her son Billy is the same hunter who killed the man, and her grandson Quinn is a quiet, shy boy. It becomes clear that Billy is abusive. He constantly insults and beats his son without reason. Later, Residential explains how she ended up here and pleads to leave, telling them she needs to reach her grandfather. But the old woman refuses to let her go. Instead, she forces Residential to sleep in the attic for the night. With no choice left, Residential quietly makes her way up to the attic, but she has no intention of spending the night. In an attempt to escape, Residential quietly moves toward the main door while everyone is asleep. She manages to unlock the door, but the old woman hears the sound and immediately sends Billy after her. Residential runs, but he catches her, and the hunter brings her back home. When Residential regains consciousness, she finds herself tied up in a bag hanging from a tree. Suddenly, a bear approaches and tries to open the bag. It seems like Rez won't survive, but Billy arrives just in time and shoots the bear. It becomes clear that they were using Residential as bait to lure the animal. She is then taken to a small storage room where Billy locks her up for a few days. One day, he lets her out, and the old woman tells Residential that she must live there and marry her son. However, Residential refuses, saying she'd rather stay in the storage room than live with a lunatic. Enraged, the old woman throws Residential back into the room. Her hands and feet are tied again, but determined to escape, Residential manages to cut the ropes on her hands and free herself completely. Though she doesn't yet have an escape plan, she notices Queen peeking into the room. Realizing Queen's vulnerability, she starts to manipulate him. Queen, tired of constant abuse from his grandmother and father, agrees to help. They sneak out of the storage room and run all night. The next morning, Billy discovers they've escaped and immediately begins tracking them, following broken branches and footprints. Meanwhile, Queen and Residential eat jam and berries and eventually reach a cliff. Queen almost falls and nearly dies, but Residential saves him just in time. Then they find a tree log that works as a bridge, and slowly both of them begin to cross it. But suddenly, Billy spots them from a distance and takes a shot. Seeing this, both start running and cross the lake. Realizing they can't outrun Billy, they decide to hide underwater. After the hunter leaves, Residential and Quinn come out of the lake and run in the opposite direction. But the hunter notices this behind his back and starts chasing again. Eventually, he catches them, but someone fights him while Residential hides behind a rock. During the fight between them, Billy's gun falls in front of Rez, but she hesitates to use it. However, when she realizes that if she doesn't act, the hunter will beat his son Quinn to death, she picks up the gun, aims it at Billy, and shoots. But it turns out that the real shooter was actually Rez's grandfather, who had arrived after hearing the gunshots. Feeling relieved, Residential hugs her grandfather tightly. Sometime later in the future, Residential and Quinn live together with Frank like a family. The state of the world is still affected by the EMP, but in the mountains, everything they need to survive is available. In the well, Residential opens her laptop and notices several messages from her friends. And with that, the movie ends.